Welcome to the Inheritance to Income podcast. This is a space for honest, thoughtful conversations about legacy, responsibility, and the decisions families are often forced to make before they feel ready. Here, we explore what families pass down across generations, not just wealth, but values, stories, and systems, and how those choices shape long-term stability, impact, and opportunity. Because inheritance isn't just what you leave behind, it's about how prepared the next generation is to carry it forward. Because inheritance has to come with instructions, and legacy is built with intentions. What comes to mind when we say the word legacy? Most of us, if we're honest, immediately think about money, assets, property, businesses, what someone left behind. And usually when we say someone is poor, what we really mean is they don't have much to give or pass on. But I want to interrupt that idea today. Because if legacy only belongs to people with wealth, then most families would be left with nothing. And that simply isn't true. So today, I want to talk about the legacy of a poor man. Or more accurately, the legacy of someone who didn't have much materially, but left behind something that still shapes lives. This isn't a data-heavy episode, it's more reflective, it's philosophical, it's faith-aware, but it does start with a truth that helps reset the room. Most American families will never leave a meaningful financial inheritance. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, only about 20 to 30% of U.S. families ever receive an inheritance at all. That means 70 to 80% of families receive nothing. And a recent Northwestern Mutual Planning and Progress study found that only about 1 in 4 Americans even expect to leave a financial inheritance. So again, 3 out of 4 families will not. Not because they didn't work hard, not because they didn't love their families, but because, life is expensive. People are living longer, and healthcare costs, for one, are far more than most families ever planned for. So here's the real question. If most families aren't leaving money, does that mean most families are leaving nothing, not leaving a legacy? I don't believe that for a moment. Before we go any further, let me pause here for just a moment. If this conversation hits home with you, I'd like to invite you to like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who's thinking about family, responsibility, or legacy. These conversations matter, and sharing them helps them reach the people who need them the most. All right, now let's keep going. When we say someone is or was poor, what do we actually mean? Do we mean poor in money? Do we mean poor in opportunity? Poor in options? Or poor by someone else's measuring stick? But here's what I know to be true. You can be broke and still leave a legacy. But you cannot be broken and expect that legacy to bless the next generation. And that distinction really matters. You see, legacy doesn't start with assets. It starts with who you are. Every single one of us is leaving something behind. The question isn't whether we'll leave a legacy. The question is whether it will be intentional or accidental. Whether that legacy will strengthen the next generation or become something they spend years trying to untangle. And every person has a balance sheet. But most of what matters never shows up on a financial statement. There's another balance sheet, a values balance sheet. On the asset side of that balance sheet are things like character, resilience, consistency, work ethic, faith, dignity, and presence. And those things compound. My own family story reminds me of this, and I'm sure that it matches so many others. Two of my great grandparents were born enslaved. They didn't own property, they were a property. They didn't have money, but they valued education. So much so that they sent their 11th child away to school in another county during the week in the early 1900s. That child, my grandfather, went on to graduate from Kinston Normal College. He sent his children to college in the 1930s and 40s at Barber, Scotia, Johnson C. Smith, Spelman College, Howard University, and the University of Chicago. That trajectory was set long before my brother attended Princeton and long before I was a Penn Quaker, long before I was even a thought. And that wasn't about money. That was generational deposits. And these are the stories that pass on values, the stories we must preserve. That was legacy designed to make an impact and advancement possible for future generations. There's a passage in Scripture that I keep coming back to when I think about legacy, especially the legacy of someone who may not have had much material wealth. In Matthew chapter 5, commonly known as the Beatitudes, Jesus isn't talking about money, property, or status. He's talking about inheritance of a different kind. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. What strikes me is that mourning comes before comfort, meekness comes before inheritance, hunger and thirst for righteousness comes before fulfillment. This is legacy language. It's about grace, it's about humility, it's about mercy, it's about peacemaking. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Every family needs a peacemaker. Someone who thinks beyond the moment, beyond the argument, beyond the transaction, and looks towards generational healing and continuity. And when families choose righteousness, when they choose to do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it's misunderstood, and even when people talk about it, that too is legacy. That's how light gets passed down. Not through what we own, but through how we live. And legacy isn't just what happens inside your family. It's what happens around it. Teachers rarely retire wealthy, but they leave legacies in hundreds, sometimes thousands of students. Community members who never owned much property, if any, helped raise entire neighborhoods. I mean, so many of us had a Mama Chup after school. People still come up to me today and tell me that my mother, who taught at North Carolina A&T State University and worked in financial aid at North Carolina State University, was the reason they finished college, that without her persistence, they wouldn't have made it. Others tell me what my grandfather taught them about work, responsibility, starting a business, becoming a civil servant, showing up, and standing up. These stories are gifts to me and part of their legacy, and families miss this all the time. If you really want to understand a person or a family legacy, don't just talk to relatives. Talk to coworkers, church members, former students, neighbors, people who were quietly changed because they lived. Legacy lives in other people's memories. You don't need money to build a legacy. You need intention. Legacy grows through time spent, through mentoring, through service, through listening, through coaching, through showing up consistently. So give your time, give your talent, give what you know. Scripture also tells us that where a person's treasure is, their heart is also. But sometimes I wonder if we've interpreted that backwards. because I think where your heart goes, that's what you treasure. And when you give your heart to people, to your community, to service, to coaching, to teaching, that becomes legacy. Let me be clear about something, though. Poverty is real, and we need to break cycles of poverty. Struggle is not holy, sacrifice is. Hardship is not the goal. We don't honor people by glorifying lack or living with a scarcity mindset. Inheritance to income clearly operates from and encourages an abundance mindset and seeks to grow generational impact and enable generational wealth. What we honor is dignity and effort, care for the next generation. Legacy should make life better, more stable, not harder. And part of honoring legacy is preparing the next generation to do better, not simply to survive. Here's the shift I want to leave you with. Legacy begins with me. It may be passed on to me, but it lives within me. We may not have lots of money, but we cannot afford to be unhealed, because unhealed passes pain forward. As the saying goes, hurt people, or at least they can. A broke person can leave a legacy. A broken person will struggle to. So the work begins inward, learning. What skills do we as individuals and a family need for the future? Healing. What hurt must we overcome, and who must we forgive? Growing. Who are we becoming? And preparing. What is our family succession plan? And this is where inheritance to income comes in. Because if we want wealth to be part of our legacy, or even the possibility of wealth creation, then we have to learn how wealth is built. That's why preparation matters. Education matters. Conversation matters. And that's why I created 12 legacy building conversations every family should start today. Not as a checklist, but as a starting point. The link is in the show notes below if you're ready to start. Because legacy doesn't start with money. It starts with conversation. Speaking of preserving what matters, today's episode is sponsored by Reese Francis Studios, helping families and founders preserve their most important stories through photography and film. Because legacy isn't just what we pass down financially, it's the stories, images, and memories that help the next generation understand who they come from. You can learn more at reesefrancisstudios.com or hit the link in the show notes below. As we close, I want to leave you with this charge. Inheritance has to come with instruction, and legacy is built with intention. Every family is passing something down, whether they recognize it or not. The question is whether it's happening by default or by design. You don't have to have everything figured out, but you do have to be willing to begin the conversation. Thank you for the time you've granted me today. I hope you'll join us for more legacy building conversations and for the work of building something worthy to pass on. God bless.